The Kroot, also known by their imperial scientific name Krootis aviana, and referenced by the common human as Kroot Carnivores, are a humanoid species of xenos. They possess a unique xenobiology, granting them the ability to shape their genes by the consumption of other life forms, and have a tribal society with hierarchy and roles reflective of this unique trait. They appear throughout the galaxy, but are most frequently associated with the Tau Empire, where large populations have been accepted into ancillary Tau society. The Kroot originated on the world of Petch in the Ultima Segmentum, and although their physiology is humanoid, there is evidence to suggest that the roots of their evolution may be avian in origin. Imperial xenologists have noted that Kroot specimens retain vestigial beaks and have a light, almost hollow bone structure, with 4 digits on each hand and foot. Their skin is rough with small barbed spines, similar to the elongated quills on their heads, protruding from various locations on their flesh. Their skin pigmentation ranges from earthy brown colors and dappled greens to vibrant oranges and everything in between. Kroot are tall, and their bodies have a wiriness to them that appears deceptively fragile. In actuality, Kroot musculature is extremely powerful and composed of dense fiber spindles with a greater power-to-mass ratio than is found in humans. Swift muscle contractions create a whiplash effect, allowing the Kroot to deliver powerful blows with great rapidity. On the ground, the Kroot tend to move with a bounding, hopping gait, but in dense forests, they can spring from tree to tree at great speed. Specific coloration of each kindred can vary quite considerably, and it is also common for Kroot from each kindred to have unnatural tribal markings painted onto their skin. Kroot mature quickly, with their most rapid period of growth occurring in the first 10 years of their lives. By the age of 12, they are considered adults, and it is not unknown for Kroot to live to over 100 years old, with their skin becoming increasingly pitted and leathery in their later years. By far, the most unique feature of the Kroot is that they can change their genes by absorbing the traits of other species, a process accomplished by eating their flesh. For instance, Kroot that eat a particularly muscular species, such as orcs, will take on more muscular physiques themselves. Kroot can undergo substantial changes through this process, able to shape every facet of their biology, from developing new internal organs to growing wings. Due to this, the Kroot warbands across the galaxy often look radically different and have on occasion been misidentified as a new separate species. Kroot leaders are known as shapers. They are generally the Kroot, with the instinctive ability to recognize desirable and detrimental traits in defeated foes and instruct the kindred what to eat to suit the task at hand. Should anything inorganic and indigestible be consumed, the Kroot must regurgitate it with considerable discomfort. The Kroot digestive system is extremely efficient, capable of breaking down almost any organic material into an energy form that can be stored in specialized organs scattered throughout their bodies, called naimunes. The Kroot generate little in the way of waste, excreting it in the form of a pungent, oily sweat that has a variety of properties depending on what the Kroot has consumed. The most apparent benefits are that this sweat appears to be heat retardant to a degree, has antibiotic properties, serves as insulation, and can cause a poorly aimed blow to slide clear. It is suspected that the Kroot can alter the properties of this secretion in order to leave pheromone trails, mark territories, leave warnings, and even communicate with one another. This may also be some form of control that extends to lower life forms such as birds and animals. as there is evidence to suggest that the Kroot employ empathic pheromones to prevent such creatures from being startled by them and giving away their position in battle. Combined with this method of communication, the Kroot can learn new languages at an astounding rate, matching posture and tone to the sound of foreign words in order to discern their meaning. Their own verbal communication is a mixture of clicks and whistles, possibly reinforced by these pheromone exudations. However, the strangest quirk of Kroot digestion is their ability to extract potentially useful strands of their food's DNA. Adeptus mechanicus genitors have long been aware that much of the double helix structure of DNA is in fact blank and used to separate those areas that do contain genetic information. The Kroot have somehow inherited the ability to incorporate useful DNA codes into their own genetic makeup. The process is not an exact science, and there are many examples where it has gone awry, leaving some trapped in evolutionary dead ends, the Krootox and Kroot hounds being the most visible evidence of this. At some point in their evolutionary history, both subspecies of Kroot fed upon creatures that were possessed of traits they wished to take on, but in doing so, atrophied their intelligence. The Krootox are now much larger and stronger, but became lumbering creatures, more akin to forest-dwelling herbivores than their smaller, more intelligent kin. The Kroot hounds became faster and leaner, but like the Krootox, their intelligence was reduced, becoming little more than vicious predators. The Kroot use these variants of themselves as laborers, pack animals, mounts, and even as weapons, especially the gargantuan Narlock. There are other variations, such as the smaller, flying Kroot hawk, which is revered by Kroot as a possible evolutionary ancestor, and the serpentine Kroot worm, as well as other, more terrifying creatures. Deep within the forests of Petch, there exist beasts that were once Kroot but have since descended into hideous evolutionary paths to become monsters that feed on their own kind. Such places have become cursed, and only the bravest or most foolhardy Kroot ever venture within their haunted depths. The limited specimens that have been made available for study are found to have brains composed of a front and rear hemisphere. It appears that the larger frontal hemisphere controls the functions of logic, reasoning, and memory, while the rear, less developed hemisphere is more attuned to imagination and creativity. If this is indeed the case, it would go some way to explaining the pragmatic approach to life of the Kroot and their current technological stagnation. The Kroot head is crowned with a great mass of tough, flexible quills that appear to be a part of the Kroot's sensory apparatus. These quills contain what seem to be ganglia running from the frontal lobes of the alien's brain, and in this position would be extremely efficient at receiving and interpreting information on the surrounding environment. The olfactory cavity within the Kroot skull is also enlarged, with multiple sense organs within both it and the mouth. Their eyes are without pupils and generally milky white. It is likely that they are able to see further into the infrared end of the spectrum and can sense the body heat generated by their prey. All of these combine to make the Kroot formidable trackers and pack hunters extremely difficult to sneak up on. The Kroot originated on their homeworld of Petch in the Ultima Segmentum, and like mankind, are relatively new to the galactic stage. Their species was terrestrial until several thousand years ago, when an orc rock crash-landed on Petch and the greenskin survivors were promptly eaten by the native inhabitants. This outside DNA functioned as the base of a genetic revolution within their fold, and after several generations, the first true city of the Kroot had been erected around the wreck. Using their newly incorporated orcoid DNA, the Kroot were able to interact with the mechboy technology found aboard the crashed rock, and within the span of a few thousand years, the Kroot had used the greenskin technology to create 5 primary hive cities. They were also able to study their interstellar invaders and construct their first warp-capable spacecraft in the form of war spheres, their indigenous starships, and take to the cosmos. Soon, the Kroot were able to colonize several worlds close to Petch. Unfortunately for the carnivores, they soon were rediscovered by the orcs and became involved in a losing campaign against the greenskins. By M38, the orcs had occupied many of their worlds, including Petch, which was now heavily depopulated. It was under these conditions that the Tau First Sphere of Expansion and forces from Dalith rescued hopelessly outnumbered Kroot on the world of Krath. The Tau soon became compelled to aid the Kroot, who accepted these new interlopers as their allies. In a 10-year conflict dubbed the War in the Place of Union, the Kroot and Tau were able to reclaim the core Kroot worlds, and the war formally ended with the liberation of Petch by their combined forces. Following the liberation of Pech, the famed Kroot shaper Angkor Prok swore allegiance to the Tau Empire at the sacred oathstone of his homeworld. He also advocated a return to the old ways, declaring that Petch should not be re-urbanized. Instead, the Kroot would return to their primal lifestyle they had enjoyed before the coming of the Orc Rock. While the Kroot swore allegiance to the Tau Empire, many would venture out into the galaxy to fight as mercenaries and collect useful DNA. After a period of time, they would make a pilgrimage back to Petch to share their genetic spoils with the greater Kroot race. Since then, the Kroot core worlds have fought loyally for the Tau and greater good, provided they receive sufficient payment. The primeval aggression of the Kroot makes them effective shock troopers, though their savagery is viewed with disdain from their Tau allies. However, the habits of the Kroot are still tolerated, so long as they don't eat fallen Tau warriors. Kroot live in kindreds, which function somewhere between mercenary companies, extended tribal families, and nomadic war bands. A kindred can vary in size greatly, and each has its own codes, traditions, scent variants, as well as skin pigmentations. Bonds between members of a kindred are extremely close, and to attack one Kroot is to raise the ire of its entire kindred. Kroot within a kindred are able to identify each other by scent. Vocalizations such as squawks and howls, and the rattle of their quills when they smell blood. Kroot greatly revere their ancestors. Known collectively as the Roots, the ancestors are venerated for conserving the wisdom, knowledge, and strands that enabled the Kroot of the present to live and continue their family lines. Kroots operate in a clan-based culture across their various homeworlds, and these clans are overseen by elders who dispatch Kroot across the galaxy, often to serve as mercenaries in order to strengthen the clan via genetic absorption. The dominant Kroot religion is understood to be polytheistic, venerating a variety of gods, including the 2 central gods of Vork and Gamork, who are credited with creating the universe. It should be noted that this mythology bears striking similarities to the 2 central figures of the Orc religion, Gork and Mork. For this reason, some Imperial xenologists speculate that the Kroot faith is a syncretization of their invaders' religion. If true, this could have happened naturally by the appropriation of the invading orcs' material culture, or perhaps more interestingly, it is possible that this religion manifested due to a latent, instinctual religiosity of the orcs, which was unknowingly absorbed by the Kroot when they consumed their invaders' DNA. Their culture sees the eating of the dead as a sacred act and honor their own fallen by consuming them in burial ceremonies. Generally, the Kroot seem to be a simple, pre-industrial society, seemingly barely capable of achieving powered flight, much less traveling through space. This primitivism is especially upheld by the teachings of Angkor Prok, who, as mentioned, advocated the Kroot return to their traditional ways and technologies, keeping only the warp-capable war spheres. Amongst the limited technology they do use is their arsenal of small arms energy weapons. The primary weapon deployed by the Kroot is a rifle whose design is derived from the fighting staffs used by their ancestors. This weapon is fitted with blades on the stock and the end of the barrel, which the Kroot make deadly use of in close combat. Originally a slug thrower, the weapon was modified by the Tau to fire a charged particle similar to their own pulse rifles. This modification quickly became standard for all Kroot. The Kroot rifle is not the only weapon the Kroot make use of. Among the other common armaments are the large Kroot gun, which is often tied onto the backs of Krootoks, and the Kroot hunting rifle, which has a potentially longer range but lacking the blades. Besides these primary weapons, their forces make use of a variety of more exotic firearms such as the accelerator bow, dart bow, Kroot long gun, Kroot scattergun, tangle bomb launcher, and Kroot bolt thrower. Moreover, Kroot mercenaries often bring back weapons from previous employers, further diversifying their armory, sometimes even wielding Imperial weapons. While their martial contract with the Tau is supposed to be an exclusive one, the Kroot regularly send out their war spheres to continue their mercenary trade amongst the wider cosmos. Despite being mistrusted by most in the Imperium, they are very faithful to their contractors. This is because they see it as their life's duty to absorb the many genetic traits across the galaxy, and betraying a client would jeopardize this mission. The Kroot's first major encounter with the Imperium was during the Damocles Crusade in late M41. This crusade was a response to the Tau watercast normalizing trade with human populations on the remote Damocles Gulf region of the Eastern Fringe, and saw the deployment of a dozen capital starships of the Imperial Navy, 5 provisional companies of Space Marines, and 19 regiments of Imperial Guard. One of these Imperial Guard regiments were the Brimlock 17th Dragoons, who assaulted the Tau Agri world of Silkel. The Guardsmen were in transit to the front lines from their landing zone when they were first ambushed by Kroot. The column's forward scouts were eliminated by Kroot Carnivores before they could get a warning off to the regiment following behind. As the main body of the regiment pushed through a narrow forested defile, the Kroot fell on them. 3 Kroot kindred were involved in the attack. Surprise was complete, and scores were killed in the opening moments of the ambush. The Guard Colonel Constantine Griffin and Inquisitorial Commissar Eigerman quickly recovered and held the Imperial line long enough to fight clear of the trap. From then on, the column was continually harried by the Kroot, until Colonel Griffin linked up with the Space Marines of the Scythes of the Emperor. With the 2 Imperial forces combined, the Kroot faded away, deeming the combined strength too much for direct confrontation. And eventually, the planet was scoured. Since then, the Imperium has kept a watchful eye on the race. Like the rest of the Tau Empire, the martial threat they pose is more a nuisance than an existential threat, and they have thus not received a great deal of targeting from the formal Imperial war machine. In spite of this, they do prove to carry a unique risk of heresy compared to more violent races because of their willingness to carry out mercenary work and trade with humans. Thus, the Ordo Xenos keeps a watchful eye on the fringe regions of Imperial space, doing their best to punish anyone who would do dealings with the aliens. Likewise, the Kroot have had to adapt their biology to the great threats of the galaxy, whose consumption can prove to be greater risks than simple evolutionary dead ends. The consumption of certain creatures has come to be forbidden by the Shapers. The first is the Tyranids, due to the Shapers being repulsed by the Tyranids' particular way of changing their genetic makeup. The second is chaotic entities and those who worship chaos, though the Kroot are not always able to distinguish cultists from the average human. The third is the Tau. Due to their role in saving the Kroot's homeworld, consuming Tau flesh is a crime that brings swift and deadly retribution from the Shapers. Additionally, Kroot that consume Genestealer flesh and Necron living metal are at exceptional risk. Kroot are able to taste the taint in the meat of dead Genestealer hybrids, even if the mutations are not visible, and the nature of the Genestealers allows them to subvert Kroot populations who consume even small amounts of their flesh. Pure strain Genestealers are even more dangerous for Kroot to consume, as it has been recorded to quickly reduce them to slaves of the hive mind. In one instance, eating part of a Genestealer's head caused a Kroot to mutate rapidly into a berserk, multi-limbed hybrid. As for the Necrons, the Kroot are bizarrely able to metabolize their seemingly inorganic living metal. They do not, however, have the ability to effectively shape the living metal of the Necrons as they do conventional organic matter, and doing so produces hideous effects. This was first observed on the Kroot world of Karok during a Sautek invasion in M41, when the Kroot Carnivores, who consumed the living metal of fallen Necrons, had hideous results as a nanoscarab plague swept through their ranks. Further study of both living metal and the Kroot digestive system is recommended. Thank you for listening to this entry from the Warhammer 40,000 Lexicanum.